Born to Abulurd Rabban as part of the Bene Gesserit breeding program, Feyd Rabban was his father's hope for a son who would not have to inherit the dishonor of his wicked family's Harkonnen name, and envisioned him as a worthy heir to his throne, unlike his older and more brutal brother Glossu. However, Vladimir Harkonnen, the ruthless and greedy Ciridar Baron of House Harkonnen, decided to take Feyd RAUTHA under his wing and raise him on the Harkonnen homeworld of Giedi Prime. He entitled Feyd as his own heir and changed his last name to Harkonnen, showing him much favor over Glossu. As such, Feyd RAUTHA grew up to be charismatic, sadistic, and vicious, with an unending lust for blood and power. Feyd's role in the breeding program was meant to have him marry a daughter of House Atreides in a hope to end their feud and produce the prophesied Kwisatz Haderach. However, the Atreides concubine, Lady Jessica, gave birth to a son, Paul Atreides, instead of a daughter, and the union not only became impossible, but an irreconcilable tension between Feyd and Paul formed, as both were the scions of their bitterly opposed noble houses. To preserve the Harkonnen bloodline and maintain millennia of genetic engineering, a Bene Gesserit envoy, Margot Fenring, was sent in to seduce Feyd and conceive his child using hypnotic suggestion. So, as we know, the breeding program that created Paul Atreides and Feyd RAUTHA was going on from thousands of years. The breeding program was indeed the culmination of a millennia, nearly more than 10,000 years of careful breeding across multiple families and genetic lines. Lastly, the final strands of this program were contained in the Atreides and Harkonnen families. The breach, referred to in the movie, is that the plan called for Lady Jessica to give birth to a daughter rather than a son, and that this daughter would then be bred to a Harkonnen male to tie the two lines together. Presumably, this Harkonnen male would have been Feyd RAUTHA Harkonnen, Baron Harkonnen's favored nephew, although it is implied that it did not have to be Feyd RAUTHA. However, it was quite clear that Feyd RAUTHA's genetic makeup was extremely important. Important enough that the Bene Gesserit sent Margot Fenring specifically to seduce him and become pregnant with his child, so that the line could be preserved should Paul Atreides kill him. Presumably, it was felt that there were important genotypes present on the Harkonnen Y chromosome that needed to be combined with an Atreides X chromosome, thus the imperative that an Atreides female breed with a Harkonnen male to produce a male offspring. Such an offspring would have the full genetic components to become the Kwisatz Haderach and would only require the appropriate training, both in developing his powers and in ensuring loyalty and obedience to the Bene Gesserit. So the next question that comes to our mind is that, what does Bene Gesserit really wanted to do with Feyd RAUTHA? So, as a product of the Bene Gesserit breeding program like Paul, Feyd RAUTHA was supposed to marry Duke Leto Atreides' daughter, so that they can give birth to a possible Kwisatz Haderach. With Lady Jessica giving birth to a male heir, she brought forth a potential Kwisatz Haderach a generation earlier, or setting the breeding progress centuries back, leaving Feyd RAUTHA at a loose end. The Sisterhood's primary purpose with Feyd RAUTHA fell through when Lady Jessica gave birth to Paul, so before they could figure out what to do with Paul, they had no immediate plan for Feyd RAUTHA. Baron, on the other hand, planned to form a marriage alliance between his nephew and one of the Emperor's daughters, so that his house would be in a more prominent position among the noble houses. In the middle of everything that was going on, the Bene Gesserit's plan for Feyd RAUTHA changed when Paul rose to power on Arrakis, because the Reverend Mother has been trying to determine if Paul was Kwisatz Haderach, first with the Gom Jabba, then by using Feyd RAUTHA. Sadly, because of this, the future of House Harkonnen served as a test for Paul. The Bene Gesserit couldn't determine if Paul was Kwisatz Haderach. He has displayed superior powers and resiliences. However, he also wasn't supposed to be Kwisatz Haderach. If Paul survived the duel with Feyd RAUTHA, the Bene Gesserit would be more inclined to believe that he could be the chosen one, though they'd still be doubtful. As a secret organization that tried to plan to guarantee a prophecy, which is more magical in nature than scientific, they're just having a hard time admitting Paul could be the one, and Feyd RAUTHA, unfortunately, became the test subject that was sacrificed in the process. So, in terms of the Bene Gesserit's genes, Feyd RAUTHA was at the same stage in the breeding system as Paul, since they were supposed to be married if Paul was a girl. Feyd RAUTHA is just as dangerous as Paul. They are a close match for each other in many ways. However, Paul's fate is significantly altered when Lady Jessica chooses to give birth to a male instead of a female. Paul embarks on a much different journey than Feyd RAUTHA. Unlike Paul, who has received training in the way and is hailed as the Lisan al-Gaib by the Fremen due to the political conflicts between houses, Feyd RAUTHA has a relatively stable life. He's arrogant and cunning. He is cheered on when he wins a fight, while Paul goes through an internal struggle to embrace his position as the new Duke. Later, the duel between the two is the only time viewers get to see Feyd RAUTHA and Paul Atreides being pitted against each other. Strictly speaking about combat, Feyd RAUTHA is a powerful opponent, and Paul nearly lost the fight, as he had to take a hit to win it, barely able to walk away with his life. Another thing that I almost forgot to mention is that his character also went through some changes compared to his book's version. So, Denis Villeneuve changed a great deal of the source material when making Dune Part 2, all excellent changes in my opinion that make the adaptation that much more powerful without ever compromising on the original spirit of Frank Herbert's novel. And those changes impact Feyd RAUTHA's storyline as well. While Lady Margot is indeed sent by the Bene Gesserit to test Feyd RAUTHA and gather his genetic heritage by conceiving a daughter with him, in the book she also implants him with a seed of weakness, a word of command that would physically lock his muscles and render him immobile. The Bene Gesserit offer this word to Paul to use during his final duel to easily prevail over Feyd RAUTHA, but Paul ends up deciding against using it. Otherwise, he would have owed his victory to the Sisterhood and be in their debt, which is not exactly a comfortable place to be. Then there's the fact that a good chunk of Feyd RAUTHA's original storyline includes Thufir Hawat, the Mentat in the service of House Atreides, who is now a prisoner of the Harkonnens. The Mentat preys on Feyd RAUTHA's bottomless desire for power, managing to almost get both the Nay Baron and the Baron killed. Sadly, Thufir Hawat was cut from Dune Part 2, something that the director himself describes as necessary but incredibly sad. So overall, raised in an environment of anger, violence, manipulation, and brutality at the hands of his uncle, Feyd RAUTHA evolved into a cunning yet impulsive youth who desired to usurp his uncle as Baron of Giedi Prime and head of House Harkonnen. Although not as repulsive nor deplorable as his malevolent uncle, he turned out to be just as power-hungry and maliciously cunning, to the point of lacking empathy in general. It would have also been interesting to see what would have happened if Paul was born as a girl and later married to Feyd RAUTHA, as it was planned. However, that's an entirely different question, and we will talk about it in some other video. So, yeah, that's all for this video, and thanks for watching.